So as a cardiologist, you're constantly dealing with heart attacks. And when you started doing this work with zoos, you discovered that what people thought were heart attacks in chimpanzees might be a whole different mechanism than in humans.
So cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death among human beings. Now, most of that death rate, most of those are deaths due to heart attacks, and heart attacks are typically caused by atherosclerosis in the arteries that feed blood and oxygen to the heart muscle. So when you think about someone clutching their chest and, then the ambulance comes and they have an EKG that's abnormal, they go to the cardiac cath lab where they inject dye, they see a blockage, maybe they do an angioplasty and put in a stent. That's a heart attack. That's one form of heart disease, and that is the leading cause of heart disease in human beings. But it turns out that we humans can have problems with our heart that are not related to the blockage of those arteries. For example, we have a muscle which is called our ventricle, and that ventricle can become sick. It can become sick because a virus attacks it. There are certain viruses that start as a very bad upper respiratory syndrome and actually attack the heart muscle, and that can lead to acute inflammation that can go on to be permanent heart failure. There are certain toxins. People who are treated with chemotherapy, sometimes they can develop heart failure on the basis of damage to that muscle. The heart also has valves. Valves are those little kind of door-like structures that separate the atria from the ventricle, right? And those valves can have infections that make them too stiff, or they can make them too floppy.
I always wonder how they last so long.
And they're so
with new cells growing just as much and not too much. It's astounding.
Right. And what's really interesting from an evolutionary perspective, there's so many things, but if you look at a fish valve, fish have two cardiac chambers, one ventricle, one atrium, right? So they have the mixture of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, but they have this valve that separates that one atria from that ventricle. And if you look at the structure of the valve and the little cords that extend from it, it's so comparable to what we see in a human, in a mammal. And so there's this structure, certainly how natural selection led to sort of this adaptive structure, and it's very enduring, and it works pretty well.
So if I have it right, though, your investigations into these heart problems in animals led you to new perspectives on some of your patients who are humans.
Right. But the point of this is that the heart can be diseased in lots of different ways, not just with heart attacks. The muscle can be affected, the valves can be affected, even the electrical system of the heart, the thing that makes the little EKG, that can become diseased. So there's lots of forms of heart disease. Well, it turns out heart disease is not unique to human beings. It is any animal that has a heart, has a beating heart, can develop heart disease. So we see fish whose hearts can be attacked by...
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
And it does. So we see heart disease across the animal kingdom.
You say heart disease in fish?
Yes, heart disease can happen, of course, in a fish. There is a form
I've never thought about fish with heart disease. So you mentioned something about salmon that are eating chicken feces and getting a virus?
Well, it turns out any ventricle, any myocyte, or the cells inside the heart, can be affected by viruses. Different viruses, different cells are vulnerable to different viruses, and of course the viruses are constantly evolving and all of that. But there is one type of virus, there are many types of virus, but one type of virus in particular affects salmon and causes this piscine myocarditis, and then itis, that suffix means inflammation, and you see this...
So fish heart inflammation.
The fish heart inflammation. And that looks a lot like the same kind of inflammation that happens to human beings who get that viral infection of the heart. Well, in the case of these salmon, that can be very significant. People who are the farmers who do farm fish, that's their living. They know this is a very serious problem. These fish get short of breath. They don't swim as fast. They kind of float to the top. They do this kind of swimming, which is essentially a heart failure type of swimming. It's not really very surprising, right? A fish has a heart muscle, and of course it's vulnerable. So the point is that animals can get all kinds of, any animal that has a heart can develop heart failure, and they do. And therefore, when we talk about heart disease, we can't think of it as being simply this modern phenomenon. We have to say that having a heart makes you vulnerable to developing heart disease.
Let's go on in just a moment and talk about stress-induced heart disease.